here for multiple hours. We welcome everybody tonight to our February meeting, Dorado APAC. I'm the chair this year, John Davey. Let's see, well, Tim White, vice chair, John Reiser, vice chair, here tonight. We're going to go ahead and begin by calling the meeting to order. And the first task of all our meetings is to adopt our meeting agenda. So if there's no objection, seeing none, we'll move along. When we begin every meeting, we offer an opportunity for public comment for anybody in the public that wants to provide comments on something that's not on the agenda tonight. So if you have something that is on the agenda, and we have nothing very specific here tonight, but if you want to wait for that opportunity for anything that's on the agenda, that's what we would prefer. So given that, if there's any comments tonight on things that are not on our agenda, we have a lovely microphone right here for you. You guys are easy. So we might be going home at 7:30. So to begin the evening, in terms of what we have on the agenda, supervisor communications from Supervisor Heidel, and he's here, and I'm going to step out of the way.
Okay, thank you, John. So I am going to be brief. There's two things I want to discuss with you. Today I took a field trip to Marysville, California. And Marysville has received an award for affordable housing innovation, and is put out by the California State Association of Counties, CSAC. They call them Challenge Awards. I'll mention that El Dorado County won 2 Challenge Awards, which is unheard of in this last cycle, bringing it home. One was our Sheriff's Hot Team, and the other was our first 5 activities with the hubs, the libraries across the county and stuff. They both won awards. City of Marysville, Yuba County won one for their innovation relative to homeless housing. And what they've done is create a facility that's on county-owned property that's got 14 tough sheds on it, and it's located on 14th Street. They're going to add 6 more tough sheds, but it's a place to stabilize the homeless, to really understand what services they need, do some triage, get them registered in whatever benefits they can get. If they're a veteran, there should be veterans benefits they may not have claimed that they can get. There's various California state programs that they can get onto. But it was a very, very, I think, informative meeting from the standpoint of seeing what they have done. We were able to take members of the Placerville City Council with us. We were able to take the Placerville City Manager. There were various representatives from El Dorado County, 4 representatives, one from the CAO's office, one from Health and Human Services, and one from our county council. So we had a chance to talk about things and stuff. What we're going to try to do is capture our thoughts and kind of give an outbrief to the rest of the staff, particularly the CAO, for instance, who wasn't able to participate. Really tell them what we saw and heard, and then try to put together a plan of what can we do in the near term to start moving in the action mode relative to accomplishing something with a new facility. And that's a big challenge for us in El Dorado County because there is no ideal location for it. Marysville seems to find a really good location. It's almost like an industrial area right next to the river. It's an ideal setting. They actually have a mission that's 150 feet away that provides the food services. So they were really able to capitalize on the location to not create a lot of conflict with businesses or residential properties or anything else. So they've got a really good system going. Sutter County, the adjacent county, just right across the river into Yuba City. It's kind of funny because Yuba City is in Sutter County, but Marysville is in Yuba County. And, so anyway, but they have done the same thing. They've set up a system like 7.24. But we've learned a lot. We want to share that with the leaders in El Dorado County and see what we can start doing to really build an action plan. We're waiting for a strategic plan to be developed, but we need to do something in the interim time period. So that was very good. The second thing I'm going to talk about was the county is currently considering modifications of our traffic impact mitigation fees again. And it's a very, very challenging situation from the standpoint that we need to anticipate where we're going to have growth, what that growth will require in terms of added capacity, safety improvements on roadways, whatever it is. But there never seems to be enough money to put in the infrastructure consistent with the growth. So we're revisiting that through the TIM fee program. We start with what we call a capital improvement program, which lists all the specific projects that we want to have within the county. I'm pushing really hard this time around to try to get Green Valley Roads improvements that were pulled out in 2015, and also the Bass Lake Road improvements that were pulled out of the CIP in 2015. They were put into an unfunded category. Happened before I got elected. I don't know all the logic that went into it, but John Bain and I are both pushing real hard to get those back into the planning. The fortunate part of that is going to increase the TIM fees to pay for those kinds of infrastructure needs that are there. But I think it's the right thing to do. The most difficult part of this is that the recent stuff we've looked at TIM fees really affects our commercial TIM fees more so than the residential, because there's a balance, as you might imagine, between both. The last thing I want to do is see our commercial TIM fees go so high that we can't be competitive with Folsom and Rancho Cordova. We already have major deficits, that we don't have electrical power costs consistent with what SMUD provides to the city of Folsom and Sacramento County. I mean, our electrical rates are almost double. So that really hurts us from the standpoint of trying to attract a business if they particularly have large energy uses. The second major deficit we have is a lot of broadband, even in our business park. We don't have broadband wiring, so how can you attract a business that wants internet services, data services, all those things, gigabyte type of capability, and we don't have it. But yet Folsom has it, Rancho Cordova has it, so we've had a major activity going on in the county to really look at what does it take to invest so that we can develop a infrastructure that provides that internet service throughout the county, the broadband service capability. It's going to be expensive, you can get grants on it, but that's an ongoing activity to try to bring it forward, because those are two things that will help neutralize. There's discussions on what do we do for electrical power. The CSD has taken on a challenge of trying to identify a working relationship with SMUD to see if we can somehow come up with some kind of agreement. I'm not sure it's going to be an annexation. Those are very difficult to achieve because all the current SMUD ratepayers would have to agree to bring a new entity called Dorado Hills into the fold, and that's generally not well accepted because they read that as, oh, my rates are going to go up, why should I do that? So it's got to be approached with the right kind of creative thinking and put it together. But we are trying to, the county's supporting all that, but the CSD here locally is taking the lead on it because the SMUD basically has a restriction that they have allowed annexations in kind of a special category for anybody who's within 5 miles of their service area. Well, we're within 5 miles of the service area, but El Dorado County, obviously the bulk of El Dorado County is not. So the approach we've taken is we want to look at what can we do to secure some level of SMUD service, hopefully to start out in El Dorado Hills, and then see if we can grow that from there over a period of time. There's other things going on with electrical power, but that's one of the things our community services district has taken on is trying to create that relationship and work with SMUD to see what they can do. We're also looking at CCAs and a lot of other things, but the county's not asleep in terms of what the needs of the people are. We're trying to really look at what can we do to be more competitive, to lower the residential month-to-month costs for electrical power, those kinds of things. So with that, I'm going to stop talking and just ask if there's any questions on anything that I can help answer this evening.
John?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Now, I had a question on SMUD.
Yeah.
SMUD is coming into the new Folsom development on White Rock, which
Right.
is within a mile, 2 miles from our county line. I can't see why they can't come across.
Well, it turns out that annexations have to go through the county that initiates it. So an annexation of El Dorado Hills into SMUD would have to go through the Sacramento LAFCO, the Local Agency for Information Commission. And you're going to have a lot of PG&E resistance to it. I mean, they're going to hire people to try to campaign against it. And again, the vote comes not from the people who are here, but the people who are currently SMUD customers. They have to be willing to approve that annexation. So the dynamics are set up against you in terms of being annexed. There was a major attempt to annex portions of Yolo County, Woodland in particular in that area, several years ago, and it failed miserably because PG&E put up so much opposition. PG&E can throw money at this, our ratepayer money, and there's no problem with that. CPUC doesn't, California State Public Utilities Commission doesn't see a problem with that. So they can fight you every step of the way, and basically they put a lot of effort trying to annex that part of Yolo County and failed. That was 10 or 12 years ago. So bad taste with a lot of people, and so the annexation process to me is just not very viable. What I'd really like to see is legislative change, and I've talked to Kevin Kiley about this. What do we need to do to open up the opportunities for formation of new municipal utility districts that would take over the infrastructure that PG&E has? You can do that through the bankruptcy proceedings. So there's a lot of things going on there, and if you do it through the bankruptcy proceedings, when PG&E assesses it and says, hey, the infrastructure we have in El Dorado Hills is worth $350 million. So you're going to have to pay us $350 million for that infrastructure. The judge can say, no, that's way too high. $100 million is the right number. So the judge can set whatever value it is for the buyout of the infrastructure. And that's important. Now, will that judge do that? I don't know. But there's a lot of other municipalities looking at the same thing, cities and counties. So how do we get into that relationship? How do we get an opportunity, hopefully with some state funding, to really take over self-control of our utilities? At least the electrical power, and you have to think natural gas goes with that for a large part of El Dorado Hills as well. So how do those play together? So there's a lot of things going on in that mix, but hopefully we'll be able to find a path with other entities to move forward. So the organizations we belong to, CSAC and RCRC, particularly RCRC, the rural counties part of the relationship we have, there's 38 rural counties in California out of the 58 total. We've been working really hard with a coalition to try to set something up so rural counties can be self-determination, right? It's self-determination relative to electrical power. Is it a CCA? Is it a municipal utility district? Is it existing expansion? So it's all under discussion. The probability of success, I'd say, is 20%. But with some legislative change that forces this stuff, I think it could be 80%. That's the key. So again, I've been working with Kevin Kyler to try to get that legislation in place. Okay, yeah, Richard.
Two questions. One, relative to the homelessness in El Dorado County, do we have a handle on where the nexus of the homeless population tends to be now?
Yes, and the centroid of the homeless population is in two places, Placerville and South Lake Tahoe. The South Lake Tahoe one really boggles my mind because the inclement weather and winter time up there, to think of homeless people surviving in Tahoe in the wintertime without shelters being built, and there's limited shelters up there, but somehow they survive. So those are the two places where we have the highest populations. We've done what we call point-in-time counts, which are required by the federal government as part of the health HUD is what it is. In order to get funding for grant monies and stuff, you have to do accurate point-in-time counts, which means you have to get an inventory of who your homeless are. What is the cause of their homelessness? Did someone lose a job and that just means they're on the street because they can't pay the rent? Is there substance abuse involved? Is there mental illness involved? Those kinds of things. So you have to provide certain data as part of this HUD count in order to get back funding for grants. It makes you eligible for grants. We've won $1.2 million in grant monies to help the homeless through two nonprofits recently, and that's huge from compared to the $200,000 we had the year before. So we are growing those funds to start putting in services and to provide a facility. But it really goes to the nexus of that point in time count. Who are these people? Where do they reside? And you're going to hear different homelessness numbers. The sheriff will tell you that when they started their hot team, there were like 240 homeless in El Dorado County, and now there's 40. Because they've been successful in solving the homeless problem, with the exception of a few transient people. Well, the point in time count says that we have 700 homeless. So obviously they're counting different people as being homeless. And then we have a nomadic shelter that operates out of Placerville that my wife and I are both involved with. Their registration of the homeless in the Placerville area alone is over 200 people. That doesn't mean they all come to the shelter every night. There may be 30 or 40 people at a shelter, but 200 different people in El Dorado County who are homeless. And again, they take intake information to try to understand it. So you're going to hear various numbers and various statistics on it. But when you get to the 700 type of number, I think it was 638, that includes youth who may be couch surfing from one family to take them in to another family to take them in. So they're not truly out in the elements. They're not unsheltered homeless, but they're homeless from the standpoint their family couldn't take care of them, and so now they're living with a friend or somebody else. But they're counted in the Office of Education counts, or the school system as being homeless, but the sheriff doesn't pay any attention to that. So you can hear all kinds of numbers that are conflicting, and you really have to focus on what are the things you can change, right? And then try to apply the resources you have, one of the resources you have to make that change happen.
Second question is,
Yeah.
you referred to Marysville and their use of top sheds
Yes.
as a housing. What local laws have had to be modified so people could live in what is basically a tool shed rather than what now you are required to have before you can get an occupancy approval in a county?
Right.
How did they do this?
This is county-owned surplus property. Evidently, this is where there used to be a mortuary and a cemetery, and so the county's owned this property for years. So the county can take exception to all those things as long as they're meeting the health and safety codes. So for instance, these tough sheds had no power in them. They have a central area where they have a barbecue and some other services. They have no bathrooms other than porta potties over there. And part of their approach is we don't want people to live here. We want people to be triaged here, to get them into treatment, to get them the services that they have due them, get them signed up for the revenues that can come from various sources and stuff. And we want to understand what their needs are. Then we want to move them out of here to a place that we can give them some kind of rehabilitation. If it's mental health, get them into a program where the doctor will look at, a clinician will look at them and say, we need to put you on this medication. That'll stabilize you. That'll take you away from the feel like you have to be self-medicated with drugs or alcohol or whatever. So there's a number of things, but they've been able to do it because it's county-owned property and it's in an area that there aren't a lot of businesses surrounding it because it's right up against the rivers and it's flat, right? Marysville's pretty flat. So they have a lot of really strong elements going for them to set that up that we have to struggle with to find where that is in El Dorado County. So never direct comparison, right? So it's what have their results been? What was their approach? What can we take from that and try to apply in El Dorado County that makes sense? And the number one thing that always comes down is location. Where do you put this kind of a triage for the homeless, assessments, all those kinds of things? Because it can't be right up against a business park. It can't be right up against residential housing. And the fact that it's county property makes it a whole lot easier to get things done because they don't have to do special permitting. So those are the provisions that we really have to work on at the county to figure out what is that location that we can do it that doesn't hugely impact the local businesses, the local residences, that yet provides the capability to stabilize people, to move them on to the next level of housing. So that's our challenge in a nutshell.
So I was going to ask, so is this a City of Marysville project or is it the County of Yuba project?
They have combined. So the
So
City of
it's a-
Marysville and Yuba County have combined on this, and Sutter County and Yuba City have combined. So it's really the two counties and the two cities that are working together. Because if you know
those are the population centers for
Yes,
those areas.
exactly.
The river split zone.
Yes. And they're right next to one another. I mean, you drive across the river, you move from Marysville to
We
Yuba
have
City.
offices in both cities.
Okay, all right, yeah. So it's not like they're miles apart. We don't have that kind of a situation, in El Dorado County. We don't have any close partners like that. I mean, probably if you looked at Auburn, the very northern part of the district out there, that's
Cool,
yeah, but we don't have that. So they have a different set of parameters they work with, but we still have to figure out what it is that we can take from that is lessons learned, things you can do, and then apply it in El Dorado County. So that's what the current tasking is. We're going to have a debrief with the people who went up there, with the managers, the organizations, and really brainstorm from what we saw and heard, what can we possibly put together as an action plan.
The consideration is that it's county property. It's in Pottsville though, right?
Yes.
So, but again, they have a responsibility for the homeless population that's in their jurisdiction.
So there's an area in
There's some benefits.
the county owns properties called Perks Court, right off the Missouri Flat Road. The difficulty was that is 3 different levels and it's very close to a lot of businesses, right up against residential. So the thing that we were looking at initially is if we can get the sheriff to buy into the concept and help coordinate that and be part of the enforcement and stuff, maybe that works. We probably have to put fencing in, those kinds of things, because nobody likes to live behind a fence. But unfortunately, our hot team wants to do it, I think, but our sheriff is saying, no, I want no part of that because of the location. So that's the one piece of county property that's probably the most available for this kind of use. But if we get a no-go from the sheriff, I don't want to go there because if they aren't going to support us with their hot team and those kind of things, it'll fail. It'll absolutely fail. So we got to do it right, in the right place.
John, what about, we have some abandoned or underutilized county property up in Placer, the old sheriff's department.
Yeah.
We also have,
That's going to be demolished. It's going to be razed because that's the site for the hopefully what's planned to be the new juvenile treatment center.
but if you need
what they call it.
a triage area that hasn't been torn down yet, that could be at least a staging point where all the services would be available. Also, the old juvenile detention hall. Now, I don't want to put the homeless in jail cells, but there are kitchen facilities that are available. There's classrooms facilities that are available. There's facilities that are available. They're in the right location. If this Placerville is the center of homelessness, and again, for even 1 year or 2 years, why a better plan is developed, this would be a temporary spot for that.
So it turns out the plan is we have a contractor come in to basically demolish the sheriff's offices in April. So that would be very short term, right? So in and out type of thing. The juvenile hall facility, what a lot of people don't recognize is downstairs has our Superior Court operation in it. And we have an agreement with them that whatever we put upstairs has to be compatible. Well, they said, okay, the juvenile hall facility is compatible, but homeless isn't. So we received a letter from them saying that's an incompatible use of that facility. You would be violating our agreement. So we're looking at how do we move the courts out of the downstairs portion, to move them down to the bottom of building C where elections is, and play this big shuffle game so we can get that facility freed up and maybe do something with it. But, I mean, that's the kind of impediments we have in El Dorado County that other people don't have. But it's the will to do it, and then it's the acceptance by people who have a heartstring that says, hey, we have to do something. I'm willing to allow this to as a trial basis, a pilot, whatever. Let's see if this works. If it works, I can live with that, right? But there's a lot of resistance built up, particularly after the Hangtown Haven experience. So we could go on all night about it, but it is a significant challenge. So, yeah, Bill.
John, realizing, as I'm sure we do, that homelessness is not a county problem, Yuba County or El Dorado County, it's an endemic situation. I'm sure we've observed in the news what happened in the city of Modesto.
Yep.
When they had a homeless encampment, if you will, triage facility, what have you. Has there been any observation from El Dorado County's point of view as to what happened there to try to either make it better or learn from it?
No.
Okay.
Because the focus that El Dorado County has been, we need to put together this 5-year strategic plan. And that's all well and good, but it's been postponed by 6 months because the funding from the state to pay the consultant to put together the plan was delayed 6 months.
Okay.
So how do you move out and get something done when your funding source isn't there? You're always kicking the can down the road. So a lot of us have grown tired of listening to that. It's just going to take time. You have to be patient. We need to find an avenue we can start doing something consistent with what the strategic plan will be, but we don't have to wait till all elements of the strategic plan are fleshed out and funded. There ought to be some things we can do moving in the right direction to get started. And that's what we're looking for. But it takes buy-in by the board of supervisors, it takes buy-in by a lot of county staff, facilities would have to buy in to doing the kind of thing. The DOT really has domain control over Perks Court, they would have to buy in. So you get to all these elements of the bureaucracy that all have to give you buy-in before we can step forward. So that's the challenge.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. I think Ellison had one more, I'm not sure.
Within about 300 yards, there's an empty lot over here. On the other side of the wall of that community,
Yeah.
and a moderately elderly man was living on his own property in a van. No housing development he was living in. I don't know exactly how he was taking care of waste and other matters. But the county was aware of this, and yet it went on for several weeks. What does it take to bring a health exclusion, to put an end to what for the neighbors was a miserable situation?
I haven't looked into that. It came up in the CCNR advisory committee meeting. It was the first time I had heard about that. But if there are unhealthy practices, and there had to be because there was no porta potty there, he's living out of the van,
Yeah.
he obviously dug a lot of holes, who knows where things were going, but you got to believe they weren't being properly disposed of. And I would have thought the county would have shut him down real quick, but I don't know the backdrop story of what happened. So it is a sad state. That should never have gone on that long. But I don't know the reason for it. So we have to address all those things too. So.
It seems so obviously a violation of common sense in terms
Health and
of
safety standards, yeah, it's unhealthy and it's unsafe, right? For kids to be around playing next door, whatever it is, and the structures he built with, some kid goes in there when he's not there and starts playing with a fork or something that falls on him. Again, that's the safety aspect of it. Those should have never been allowed the way they were set up, in my opinion. But for whatever reason they were, I haven't gotten to the bottom of that yet. So. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, John. So tonight, we have a guest speaker. It's Dr. Ron Cruz. He's superintendent of El Dorado Union High School District. And for the past several months, we've been talking about Central El Dorado Hills Specific Plan and other projects. And the observation we've always made here is that when the communication goes out from the county to local agencies, and we get copies, a lot of them, for input before the project really starts, just to get a sense of objections or concerns or acceptance. Most agencies don't respond. The ones that do seldom have any sort of challenge, or concern. So with that, we invited Dr. Carruth because we thought, hey, that'd be an opportunity. He can discuss basically how his district receives information, what they consider, how they make the determinations for, like things like enrollment numbers, the projections and all those good calculations. So with that, I'll invite Dr. Cruz up here, and there'll be an opportunity to ask questions, and you might even have questions for us. Thank you.
Great, good evening. Nice to see everyone.
Thank you.
I had the opportunity to have a little bit of a conversation coming in. My first public meeting 2 years ago when I became superintendent was right here, and so 2 years later I get to come back and spend a few minutes with you. I do want to start by just saying thank you for the outstanding relationship that we have. I've worked very closely with the CSD, worked very closely with John, any issues that we've had that have come up. I've got a direct line to John. We've met several times on different challenges that we face in conjunction with one another, supporting our work. So thank you for the excellent relationship. The district is really proud of all of our schools, but I do want to highlight some of the successes of Oak Ridge. Oak Ridge in particular, serving the majority of this community right here, is just a fabulous school. It has incredible academic success. You probably just saw in the news recently that they had a 4-peat for the academic decathlon championships. Ponderosa thought they had them dead to rights. They got up and announced the winner of the academic decathlon from Ponderosa, and second place from Ponderosa, and everybody thought that Ponderosa had pulled off the upset. And then from behind, by a mere 2 questions over 3 days, Oak Ridge came from behind and pulled it off again. So it was an amazing competition hosted by the county. In addition, I hope you saw on KCRA the great news of the national champion cheerleading girls back from Florida. That is an incredible accomplishment. And then in addition, you can't even watch Notre Dame football in the fall without realizing that our very own Ian Book is the starting quarterback for Notre Dame. So we're very, very privileged in this community to have extraordinary schools, and Oak Ridge is at the core of that for us. In addition to
Ross
that,
Rowley is playing for the 49ers as backup.
yeah, good point. Good point. That's right. We go all the way to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, that's right.
All the way to the Super Bowl. In addition to that, we have been working really closely with the Serrano Homeowners Association for El Dorado Hills. I'm sorry for the CSD. I'm sorry, getting my areas. Our Serrano Melrose fee has been negotiated to have a sunset date, which I think is fair for everyone. Serrano has been incredibly supportive of Oak Ridge High School, specifically with facility funds to be able to manage the growth generated by that community. But I think in a good way, we were able to find an equitable settlement. When you look at Melrose fees across the state of California, when they apply to schools, on average, they're 40 years. And so this is significantly less than that. So I think it's been fair to the people in Serrano, as well as fair for watching out for the partnership of the students in our schools. You will begin definitely over the next few years to see some enhancements done by trying to move from more portable buildings to more permanent capacity on the campus that I think will help improve the student daily life over a course of time. In addition, when it comes to working with the CSD, we have been in great communication, thinking about some of the property, as I mentioned last time I was here 2 years ago, talking about the property that we own out on Latrobe Road, south of 50. that could benefit the greater El Dorado Hills community. We have over 200 acres of land there. And as you know, open space is a real challenge within any community, particularly one that's developing quickly, and a lot of those dollars are taken up in terms of taken real estate. When you think about building a high school today, you need approximately 60 acres. So we would need 60 acres to build the parking, to be able to build that facility someday into the future. But that also leaves well over 100 acres to be thoughtfully worked out with the CSD in terms of how we could use that land in such a way to benefit the community, sports fields, opportunities, senior centers. There are a lot of very, very exciting things that over a period of time could come from that. So we remain being very good partners, thinking ahead and not losing the opportunities that we have to service this broader community within our valley. In addition to that, we're watching carefully the discussions and development options for the executive golf course, the El Dorado Hills Central Plan. So that goes back to what do we see moving forward? How does this impact the high school district? Well, one thing that we're seeing across California is since we started the Great Recession in 2008, there was a precipitous drop in the birth rate of children in the state of California. And that has not recovered. Back in 2008 and 2009, when that recession hit, birth rates dropped to their lowest since 1936, the heart of the Depression. And we would have expected those birth rates to bounce back up to what they would have been on kind of normal rates. Well, that has not entirely happened. Well, probably part of this we know, kids are expensive. And so there aren't as many children being born. And so across the state, we see a more than decade long decline in enrollment. So we will see in 10 years in California, there will be fewer students in our K-12 system than there are today. So what does that mean specifically for the El Dorado Union High School District in Oak Ridge? We anticipate that we will reach our highest enrollment point at right about 7,000 students in 2 years. And then after those 2 years, we will begin a steady, slow decline, probably for approximately the next 10 years. So, if we were to look at Oak Ridge High School in 5 years, they're probably at least another couple hundred students smaller than they are today. They'll peak up in a couple years, and then for 3 consecutive years and further into the future, they'll decline. Not becoming small, but just simply fulfilling that predictable pattern that we can see. And we at Rescue here, they would be looking at those same challenges as well as Buckeye. That is consistent across every single school district in our entire county, and like I mentioned, across the state of California. The only areas that you see really bucking those trends would be the temporary move from large development. So in terms of watching development, one thing that I've learned being back home for one piece, and that is trying to read the tea leaves of development in El Dorado County is an almost impossible task. So we do work with a team of demographers that watch very carefully the developments within our area. Norm and I have met a few times to talk specifically about the impact of his development on our schools. So we remain in good, clear dialogue, and so we have thoughts of how we move forward in the future. We have precise triggers on enrollment, at what point in time we would begin working on the financing plans for a new high school, what triggers in enrollment would have that happen. We have already identified the architect specifically for that, who's actually an Oak Ridge parent, to be able to assist us in that process. So we are planning, but given that long-term decline, what we're doing are building the benchmarks that we would see so we can prepare for that looking into the future. So in terms of our snapshot in the larger area is the district is in a good place. Our schools are doing excellent academically. They're great socially. One of the beautiful things about our greater community is we have absolutely fantastic K-12 school systems. Rescue is a fantastic system. Buckeye is a fantastic system, and it builds into good high schools. So the quality of life is excellent for us. we do see that decline coming. That pushes your budgets a bit, so you have to be very thoughtful in terms of your capital outlay and expenditures. But we're planning extremely well for that, I feel. And we always are working on our facilities. One thing that I'll mention a bit, I'll give you like the 3-minute story on it, but you'll see Measure A, our school bond, on the March 3rd ballot. That is specifically for the high schools at the El Dorado Union High School District. There are really 3 things that it's trying to accomplish. Number 1 is student safety. There is not a day that I wake up in the morning that safety is not on my mind for any one of our campuses. I think all of us, as we watch news across the country, we're very aware that security today is at a highlight for all of our schools. I'll never forget when I was a high school principal and Columbine happened. That is just a memory that still, for me, lingers in the back of my mind. And so a portion of this bond is absolutely dedicated to making sure that our schools are as safe as we can possibly make them. A second portion of this bond would be for upgrading and repairing simple things like roofs and electrical and plumbing, things that over a period of time deteriorate. We think of Oak Ridge as a fairly new school. Oak Ridge was built when I was a junior in high school when it opened. That's going back to 1979, 1980. So Oak Ridge is not that young any longer, and we've added a lot to it, but the bones of that need some definite support. The third and last portion of the bond is really focused on career technical ed, career pathways for students, so that we're making sure that they have real viable opportunities beyond graduation, so that we can keep competitive jobs in our community. We don't have to drive or bring people from Sacramento up here to fulfill those sorts of jobs that we would like to use our graduates for. One of the trickiest things about bonds when you're asking the community for support is the issue of debt. Right? How much debt does the high school have? How do we compare to other school districts? So in the state of California, there are 68 high school districts that are very similar to us. When we look at those 68 high school districts, we are 8th from the bottom. We are really in the bottom, like 13% of high school districts in the state of California for debt. On one hand, that's good because we're being responsible with managing that debt. On another side, it's not that good. What I mean by that is as your facilities age, you know you have to put more money into maintenance and operations. And as you fall further and further behind on being able to put capital investments into those facilities, you spend more and more money on maintenance and operations, to a point that you're now beginning to take away funds from student programs and other pieces just to keep your facilities going. So with that, we feel that we've been extremely responsible with that, being so low in contrast to the state, that even if we passed Measure A, we are still below the state average for bond indebtedness. Another portion, and this is an interesting one, is that there's a state bond on the California ballot for March 3rd. Specifically, if that were to pass and our bond were to pass, we would qualify for approximately $70 million of additional state matching funds. Those would be funds that are not raised locally, but are basically coming from Sacramento to our county. I can tell you right now, the majority of our architects and construction people live right here between El Dorado and Placerville, El Dorado Hills and Placerville. Those dollars will go to a lot of those firms that will go right back into our community. The difficulty for us is that Measure A fails and that state bond passes. All the money that we put in as a community, as a district within our boundaries, that goes to Sacramento in the general fund, will go to other communities, and our money will not come back home. So that's partially why we have gone out now. There is a real opportunity to keep our funds local and not lose that. So for example, in my school district, our elementary school district is Gold Trail. Gold Trail has the lowest bond debt in all of our school districts of El Dorado County. Now, on one hand, that's great because it's not big on my tax bill, but on one hand, it's not good at all because they're going to need improvements in that facility. And if they don't go out and get in line for the state bond right now, that means it's all going to come from me instead of from me as well as the state of California. And so there's that idea that we are poised to be able to bring our dollars back home for us. So when you really look at what we're trying to accomplish, please go to our El Dorado Union High School District website. You'll see a lot of information on Measure A. Feel free to shoot any emails or any questions that you have. Our board is trying to be incredibly responsible for putting and asking the community for what we need, but not more than what we need. So for example, we could go for nearly twice the amount to our community and ask for it in funding capacity, but the truth is we don't need it. And so if you don't need it, don't ask your community for it. Be responsible with your debt, and when you need it, come forward with a fair request, and that's what we're hoping people will take a good look at. The last thing I would say is that the way we've approached this bond is twofold. Number one, we didn't want to decide what was going to be accomplished for each site at the district office level. What we did is we went out and met with teachers and staff and parents and community members and built project lists for each one of those sites with that input. So all of these lists, all of these identifications, all of these priorities have been built really at each one of our school sites to make sure that it is sort of a bottom-down, driven solution to the challenges that we want to try to accomplish on each one of the campuses. So thank you for the time. Wonderful to be here with all of you, and thank you for your support of all of our schools. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have about anything that came up there. Question right there.
Thank you for coming. I appreciate it. As you're talking about the drop-off in 2008, and I understand using the birth rate to...
Can't hear you.
Sorry, I understand using the birth rate to look at enrollment rates.
Yeah.
But I think there's a lot of other factors that may go into enrollment, and I'm wondering if there are other things that the district is looking at. I have a son who's 5. The enrollment for him, we're all Bay Area transplants. I would
Right.
say 98% of his classmates are all Bay Area transplants. And we're moving up here for the schools. And I don't know that the birth rate actually takes that into account. If you're just purely looking at that decline, I think a lot more people are coming here than that would reflect.
I think you're definitely right. There's a broader methodology and formula that you use, so it can be anywhere from the square footage of the house, the cost of the house, how many students those houses tend to produce on those sorts of variables. So it is beyond simple birth rate, definitely for sure. The other part, it's a little easier for a high school district to predict its enrollment, only in the respect that we have all the K-8s that we can watch really carefully, so we kind of know what's coming, so we can have some variable changes, but it can only happen over 4 years for us. Whereas for the elementaries, it starts in really TK to K and then all the way to 8, so they have almost like 10 years that they're trying to guess. So for us, we've got 10 years of predictable numbers, but you are right, it is a more complex methodology, and there are specific firms in California that specialize in those enrollment growths and have all of those matrices put into those projections. So good
So
point.
can I go to the second part of the question?
Yeah.
So let's say there is a decline in 5 years. Would the district consider rezoning? Because one of the major problems we have, like let's say you go to Blackstone, you're zoned to go to Union Mine. And that's a big issue. A lot of our friends are selling their homes because they don't want their kids to be going to high school out of the area. And then it's a lot harder for people in Blackstone to sell their homes because people don't want to buy and have to go to a high school that's out of district.
I think at some point in time, there will have to be a review of those boundaries, especially as developmental growth begins to happen, because there's going to come a point in time where growth from development will take place. We won't be in a position to have this total school facilities accomplished at that point in time, but we can see where it's moving, so we'll have to move some students around in some way. So I can see over a period of time those enrollment areas changing for sure, but I don't see it happening quickly. Question? Right here.
Yeah, thank you again. Yes, thank you for coming. I'm living in Serrano, And so there's a lot of questions swirling around about the Central El Dorado Hills specific plan and how that impacts the school. So I kind of have two questions. Are your projections including the potential of 750 houses up in that specific plan? And second is, what's the right answer to homeowners that are putting social media saying our school's going to be overcrowded, if this happens? What are your thoughts on that?
I think in the first piece, what we do is definitely watch to see what are the triggers for the decisions that are made and how long will it take for those houses to be realized if that decision were to be made. I think one piece that addresses that in a clear sort of way is the decline that we see. So if by the time those houses begin to materialize, even if it's 750, that's approximately 100 students, just kind of rough magnitude, and we decline 250. So I don't see that particular issue impacting Oak Ridge's ability to be able to house the students. I think the real key is what's best for the community and what the community decides, and we'll be prepared one way or the other. Great question.
Okay.
Yeah. We go right over here.
I was reading through Prop 13. There seems to be a section in there dealing with multifamily housing built around transportation hubs.
Yes.
That has an exemption for developers from school-related fees.
That is correct.
What are your feelings about that?
That's a good question. So I will be the first to confess I'm not an expert in Proposition 13. I have mixed emotions about the initiative or proposition itself. There are a couple elements. So if you'll bear with me, I probably don't have a perfectly formulated answer, but I will endeavor to be helpful.
At least you've heard about this question.
Yes, most definitely. So Proposition 13 is most definitely a school bond. And so with that school bond, they were trying to address two things. The use of the number 13 associated with our property tax protections is very unfortunate because the two are completely unrelated. So the first piece, they were trying to figure out a way to be able to pass a school bond to help schools have modernized facilities, but also at the same time keep affordable housing manageable and try to take some tangible steps in that direction. So if you're close to a hub, transportation hub, or you are building a certain type of residential, let's say high density apartment, something like that, more affordable housing, districts will lose 20% of the building permit fees from those projects. So what they're trying to say is if we can cut those fees, we can keep housing perhaps in one of these areas more affordable. So that was their intent. And whether that's practical or not, we'll see how that plays out. The other is that it allows school districts to be able to raise the limits on how much you can ask your community to be able to support your schools. And I have real mixed emotions about this one. So for example, for the El Dorado Union High School District, the maximum that we can raise from the community is 1.25% of assessed valuation of residences. That has been in place for a great number of years, way back into the 70s. The difficulty of what's happened is the cost of construction has escalated far faster than the assessed value of properties. So that when we go to build today, we're building for the Department of State Architect for example, both the solar panels here as well as the ones at Oak Ridge, those are rated for 240 mile-an-hour winds. Those are engineered to, if there's an earthquake or a nuclear blast, run to those doggone things because they will be standing there. They are so deep into the ground. So the engineering standards that we have to adhere to today and the cost of construction, because of litigation, materials, the rise of China, cost of cement, all of that have risen so dramatically that our costs for construction have far outpaced our ability to raise money. So it's put school facilities in California in a bad place. So what this does is it does allow school districts to raise more money to be able to address those needs. On one hand, that's a good thing because we all want safe and modernized facilities for our students. But at the same time, I worry that some communities that are not as aware of debt and know how to manage that well can secure too much debt and then not be responsible to taxpayers. So, for example, I think our board has been really cautious. We live in El Dorado County. We're really thoughtful and nervous about taxes, and we should be. But some communities aren't. Some communities will go after as much as we can. So, for example, like our school board decided to set our bond at $120 million. Under the current statutes, we could have asked for $245 million. That's a big difference, right? But our school board looked at that and said, you know what, that's not what we need. What we need is that smaller amount. Let's ask our community for that. In other communities, you would always ask for the maximum amount. And this Proposition 13 allows that to happen. So in more moderated, conservative communities, I think it's a responsible piece of legislature. On the other, I just fear that in some communities, there's just too much debt that's happening, perhaps being driven by other interests. So I'm really mixed, even myself in schools. I love kids and I want to be reasonably competitive with other places, but I'm a little bit mixed on Proposition 13, just to be honest, from my perspective.
I have a couple of questions. One is, given that there is potential for 700 residential units in the Parker development, there's something like 700 down south of 50, isn't it?
1,000.
And then there's 3,600 houses for Marble Valley. Do you mean to tell me that you expect declining enrollment in El Dorado Hills?
That's a good question.
Yes, I think it is.
And that's why you asked it, right? No. You know what I've seen is there are a lot of numbers tossed around, and this is probably like, I don't want to put Norm on the spot, but Norm makes his livelihood in this world, and you can hear a lot of large numbers tossed around, but then in the net impact of really what gets built is very different. So we have definitely looked at those plans, and we have master planned it. When we hit about 6,000 approved new units that we can see, that will trigger like a new high school beginning to move forward. And it'll take time to be able to build that. But I do think that in the short term, especially when you look at the kinds of houses that are going into those developed communities, those aren't the ones that are producing a lot of K-12 students. Our loading factors are much smaller here because of the nature of our houses there. Some of those are senior communities that are going in, so, but we do watch that very, very carefully.
Second question is, I think people, and I want to dispel any unfounded rumors that Ray and I have children in elementary school. But I do have some younger friends who pose some questions to me. Now, one of them, there is a fear among people I've talked to that if they approve this Measure A, which is $120 million,
yes,
you're going to take that money and you're going to improve El Dorado High School. You're going to improve Ponderosa, and meanwhile the kids are coming into El Dorado Hills. So what you're doing is fixing up El Dorado High School and Ponderosa and make them very nice, and I don't argue with that too much. But it decreases the opportunity for the school district to look at the real problem, which is the enrollment down here. 2,400 kids at Oak Ridge, plus I don't know how many more are coming, since you won't tell me. So they say, why would we want to vote to spend $120 million to improve those schools when it ensures that our kids will be bused up the hill to El Dorado, Ponderosa, Union Mine, somewhere else in the area? It creates the problem for Blackstone. I know two people specifically who bought in Serrano. They said both of them looked at Blackstone for houses until they found out where they had to go to school. They did not buy the house in Blackstone. They moved up and bought a house in Serrano. And I think it's a problem. I hear Parker and other people say the school district can handle this, right? They can handle it by shipping kids to El Dorado and shipping them to Ponderosa. And I don't know how the community will vote. They may approve but I think we have a real PR problem here because they're looking at an opportunity for their kids to go to local schools and not to El Dorado and not to Union Mine. And if you don't address that, you're going to have a revolution going on in El Dorado Hills. One of these days, and maybe tomorrow, I don't know.
Well, I think a couple things. The first part on the distribution of those dollars. And I think that's a real concern, and that's a concern in every school community you go to, right? If you're at El Dorado High School, they're worried about how much money is going to go to those other schools and not to them. That's a true and valid concern in each one of our places. What I have been sharing with the with the El Dorado Hills community is the first piece that you look at is where your enrollment is. And then you also look at the condition of your schools. The last time that Measure Q was passed, we did a lot of good things at Oak Ridge, but you also had a pretty old El Dorado and Ponderosa facility that were much older in terms of time. A lot of work was done there, a lot of work was done here. But when I look at this bond, and I think of where those dollars are going to be needed most, I do believe it's Oak Ridge. I do believe that the facility at this point in time has aged sufficiently where we have a lot of specific needs. Our co-chair for this measure is Brooke Van Komen, and Brooke has looked me straight in the eyes and said, if I am going to go out and work the community and be honest and be forthright about what we're going to try to do, I need to know that you're going to be fair. And so I think when I look at the piece, there's an inherent desire to be fair within our group. Our assistant superintendent of educational services, Chris Moore, lives right here in Serrano, and his kid attends Oak Ridge in the virtual academy. Tony DeVille was a graduate of Oak Ridge. Pam Bartlett was a long-term assistant principal at Oak Ridge. So within the team that makes the recommendations to our board, I feel that there is really excellent coverage of making sure that we're fair to each one of those communities. But I will be honest to say, from my perspective on this bond, the real need sits at Oak Ridge at this moment in time. So I can say that publicly, and that's the way that I see those lists.
I have a question. Thinking about development, I've noticed lately when you try to go down Silver Valley, the number of cars that parents park along the streets, double parking, triple parking. What will happen if Costco builds very close or on Silver Valley? Are you planning for that? And the other question is, why isn't there more busing happening so that you don't have this number of parents parking and really causing I think it's a safety kind of a thing.
Yeah, I think there are two parts to that. I think the idea of the master planning with 3 schools in one very small vicinity is a bit of a challenge. Without that, by the time you take, our elementary, our middle, and our high school, the congestion at that moment is pretty intense. I think certainly thinking about a Costco sitting off of there, a lot of us would probably start taking El Dorado Hills Boulevard again, instead of maybe coming off that side at certain times of the day. I know for us, we have been talking with the CSD in terms of possibilities of parking lot expansion to take students off the street. It's not the best means to have kids parking along the street and, trying to cross, and it just becomes pretty difficult. The other piece too that we're working on, if we can get Measure A through, one of the first projects would be is to vastly improve our drop-off zone in front of Oak Ridge. Just the way it's configured right now with the size and all of that, it creates too much congestion, and so we really need to make that more efficient to be able to try to reduce traffic. That is definitely a challenge anywhere where you're talking a number of schools in one small location, for sure.
I'll follow up real quick on that, and I'll turn it back over. Would you say that the challenge for all the campuses in terms of circulation in the morning, the afternoon is probably not as bad? I know that I'm at Ponderosa, there's 2 roads at that high school.
Yeah.
She starts back next year. So I'm awful up there. But in terms of the buses, we take advantage of the afternoons, when parents are working. when a kid is in marching band leadership or color guard or some other activity, we have to go back and forth. Been there 3 times today. But are all the campuses have that sort of that circulation challenge just because of the rural nature of our roads?
It's definitely true. The 3 that have the largest problems are definitely Oak Ridge with that. Ponderosa is just a few hundred students short of Oak Ridge, and there's one main thoroughfare and one cross street that dead ends basically into the school. That's a huge problem. If you've been around Ponderosa High School, students are parked, like they are here, for a half mile.
Graduation is fun.
Graduation's crazy. Exactly. In El Dorado, you have Canal Street, but you also have Markham right there as well. So we definitely have problems with that. I do believe that with the move over a period of time, next year we are starting Oak Ridge at 8:30 in the morning, and so we'll be offset in terms of the starting time. With that later start for the state law, we could have the blessing to be able to address that here first of all of our schools. And so I think that will help with some of that congestion. But it's definitely true anytime you're moving between those hours, right before or right after school, it gets congested. Busing is a definite challenge for us. Best way to say that is California has not addressed the issue of school buses since the formula that they put in place in if you can believe this, 1980. The funding that we receive in the El Dorado Union High School District is based off our enrollment in 1980. Before Oak Ridge was really up and moving, before Union Mine was built, takes no consideration whatsoever in terms of the growth of students over the course of that time, the development of our county. It is antiquated, it's embarrassing, and it's terrible. And so we just are working a bit on some of our budget challenges that all of us are having in public education, because we're like many entities where the state is passing regulations that impact our way of doing business, and the cost to comply with their requirements is going up faster than the revenue that we receive. But I'll give you an idea. We're cutting 2 bus routes. Just a bus that gets up in the morning and goes about 25 miles and comes back and picks up kids, drops them off. Another one that goes to another area. $185,000 of savings just to run 2 buses. That's how expensive busing is for us. So it's a real challenge. So we would love to have more busing. It's just California and Sacramento needs to grow up and really relook at what they're asking us to do. I have less busing money in El Dorado Union High School District, and you think about the size and distance of our boundaries, than I did in the Whittier Union High School District when we were 10 miles by 8 miles. So think about that, 10 miles by 8 miles, we had far more busing money down there than we have in the El Dorado Union High School District, where we send buses out all the way to Grizzly Flats, 70 miles out and 70 miles back plus every day. So it's ridiculous what the state of California has done to not addressing our needs in K-12 public education. Now you got me on a really annoyed. You can tell I got annoyed on that one.
2 questions. Help me with some numbers here, because you have a $120 million bond.
Yes.
Now, if that passes and Prop 13 passes and there's $15 billion of funds, you're going to be eligible for some matching funds?
That's correct. Up to around $70 million.
So if you get $70 million in matching funds, are you going to use $150 million Prop 8 bonds, or are you going to need substantially less than that if you get $70 million from the state?
So if we pick that up, what we figure is that if by asking for the smaller amount but getting that state matching, that we would be able to do the work that we would need to do. And we'd probably be able to have it done for quite some time. So that's why the smaller ask, if you would say that. But we're really trying to leverage those state dollars. Now I'm a little ambivalent about whether Prop 13, that state bond, passes. Just simply, I think the number and the confusion that was created, around that, if you look on social media, it's kind of nuts. So I think they may have to come back, actually, if it fails, and redo another state bond, just simply to keep up. There's so much pent demand in California for school facilities that it's there, but I think anytime that we can time it right to use state money instead of the money alone that we pay, that we're already paying, and bring that home, that's an advantage. And that's what we're trying to capitalize on.
And I guess my second question really deals with the process of when you get notice of development. Now, we all hear about these things, but the first official notice that comes out of the Department of Planning is usually about the scoping meeting, where there's a plans are dealt with that the developer is going to have a public meeting, and in connection with this, as John said at the introduction, he introduced you, is that goes out to every utility company, every school district, the library, all the public and private agencies that might be affected by development. And it's about 30 different names overall. APAC, that's how we find out about it. Now, they ask for comment, and we've never seen a comment come in from your school board. Then there's a draft environmental impact report that also gets sent out to all those 30 agencies asking for comment. We've never seen an official comment come back from the school district or the board or anyone involved with the district or the board. Finally, there's a final environmental impact report. Again, no comments come out from you guys. Is it the policy of the board that you don't comment on these things, or do these things just end up, here and then on the trash? Because what happens? Because there's no response.
Yeah.
And if there's no response, do we need to get parents or people who are great-grandparents who don't have any kids in the schools, but do they have to go to the school board meetings and say, what the hell are you guys doing?
So I think a couple things. I think across the state of California, I think you would find that's pretty consistent with the way that K-12 operates. So K-12 will get the notifications. What we'll do with those notifications is immediately ship those off to the people who do our demographic studies, just to make sure that we're monitoring those developments. The second thing is, if we begin to see that comes into play, we'll begin working with, John, coming down and talking with John, sharing concerns like that, making sure that the people who are on those committees, as appropriate, might get spoken to, but we don't spend a lot of time hiring people to write a lot of comments and do a lot of analysis. Really, for the most part, we're trying to respond to what the public's desires are, and that is not an apparatus that we're particularly engaged in the early piece. So it's not from benign neglect or anything, but we are watching that development to see what happens. We'll definitely, I've sat down with John and asked his opinion in terms of what he thinks of the timeline for some of that development. Some of our other county supervisors as well, or different staff, because you could hear about 6,000 homes in Marble Valley, and what's the likelihood that the first phase is going to be built? What do you think that timeline would be? What are those procedural steps? Here would be the concerns we might have. More through that avenue than actually hiring staff to be able to address those responses. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, that's the answer. Now we know.
Very good. John.
Well, I have a question. There's a resident of El Dorado by the name of Steve Ferry, who presented to various forums a vision of what he thought we needed to do with the 200-acre parcel we're talking about in terms of creating a new high school, repurposing Oak Ridge High School, those kinds of things. Are you aware if you ever made a presentation to the Board of Trustees on that? Was there any traction, any feedback at all? I just kind of lost track of where it went.
Yeah, I remember reading about that, but there has never been a presentation to the board about that.
Okay.
I don't think in the portions that I read that the analysis was in any way accurate so that it could become a feasible plan. But most definitely, I've met with members of the CSD here. Members of the CSD board have also met with our board to talk specifically about those acres and what we might be able to do in the future with that. We do have drawings for a new high school and how that would be laid out. So we're definitely in conversation about that. So those contacts are present there, but I think we realize that we have a real opportunity to do something very good for this broader community, and we want to hold that to do it right in conjunction with El Dorado Hills. Back over here.
Yeah, I just have a quick question. Thank you for outlining different variables and things that you guys have to deal with in the community, the school, the growth, and the development. My where are they at, what capacity were they built for, where are they at, and when you say, 2-year growth, because I get the concept, it's gonna grow, it's gonna drop. How impacted do you see them getting? So it's not to cause hysteria, because I can tell you amongst those of us with 5th or 8th graders, there's a bit of hysteria going on.
So if we take into account very moderated development looking into the future, we see Oak Ridge in 2 years at about 2,500 and let's say 20 students, and then that sliding down over the next several years to into the 2,100 student range. Ponderosa peaked out at over 2,000 students, and it is actually in its first year of decline. It's a little bit different there. We see them dropping down to about 1,600 students over the next several years. So those would be those two specific schools. So you can see there's capacity in that. And I think that comes into play too of how we look over a period of time with our school attendance boundaries and development that happens. There'll be some capacity at those schools that we can house that until we can see that larger, I would just say, build starting to go on, and then we're prepared and can see the path to be able to finance that new high school, and we know what those triggers and those timelines are once we see those enrollment triggers coming.
What are they built for capacity-wise?
Let's see. It all depends in terms of how many students are taking how many different classes, but I think you can look at something like Oak Ridge being able to accommodate 2,600 students without too much traveling of teachers. Ponderosa probably about 2,100 to 2,200 students without too many traveling teachers. Across the state, one of the things that you can do is if you think you're a teacher and you are teaching, let's just say on average 5 periods, and you maybe have a 7-period day, you have 2 periods where your classroom is not utilized, so you can be in there to kind of correct your papers, meet with students as appropriate, so you have space. So it is not uncommon in high schools that are growing to be able to use those 2 other open periods and put students with another teacher. The teacher has to travel to that. So there's capacity up about 20% that you can move in just about any given high school in a particular time period. And that's what we have to utilize as flexibility as we prepare for those new high schools in the future.
Okay. For the Central Hills plan, or Central plan, will those new homes be zoned for Oak Ridge?
Right now, they would be designated for Oak Ridge.
And then, you said that not all of those homes would be homes that you would consider in the 6,000 trigger. Why is that?
No, all of those would be part of that greater, let's say, 6,000 unit trigger that would put us on the trajectory for that next high school. So they would be included.
How does that trigger start? What's the start point and end point? Like, so what homes having been developed already are considered in that 6,000?
So right now, we definitely look for the 6,000 new starts. The piece that I think we're watching carefully is to see what is the final determination of the central plan and the sequence by which those homes would potentially be built if that is what is approved for that development. So for example, I could see just hearing in different conversations, whether this is accurate or not, just listening, but I could see 150 homes being built and then stopping for a while and then having that develop forward.
No, I understand that. I guess I maybe didn't make my question clear. Have you already factored in the development that's gone on over the past 2 to 3 years of Blackstone? Are those homes factored in that 6,000 trigger?
If they're residences where people are attending, they're already assumed in our current enrollment. So it would be an additional 6,000 above what is currently, let's say, occupied by people to be able to create that trigger. Now, the tricky part too gets to be is what's the nature of your development. So if we had a large housing development come in that was focused on seniors 55 and above, that's a different sort of development when we look at those loading factors, because we're simply not going to have many high school age kids there.
No, I'm not sure if I understood the question right, but I'll ask the question. What is the expected, or what are El Dorado Hills, or El Dorado High School and Union Mine, what are they equipped to handle the number of students? And if you take out those that have been bused in El Dorado Hills, how many do they presently have? Is that,
Well, I asked about Pond Road Overage, but that would have been.
Yeah. The number of students actually bused from, let's say, that area up to Union Mine are fairly small. I'd have to go back and analyze what that number is, but they're not large a number right now. And especially as time comes forward where we may have some development of units taking place in the Union Mine area. In a similar sort of way, years ago, there was a lot of development that was planned.
what's the enrollment there now?
The enrollment at Union Mine is approximately 1,200. That's
1,200?
Yeah.
And now that El Dorado?
El Dorado right about the same, moving to probably 1,400 in the next couple of years. We have.
They're not going to decline.
Pardon?
El Dorado High School is not going to decline, it's going to increase?
It will increase for the next 2 years, and then it will go through a slight decrease as well. There you go.
Does the district own those 200 acres?
Yes.
And would the district consider a deal where there would be a private school or selling some of those acres? If you only need 60 acres for a high school?
Well, I think from a competitor matrix, you would never sell it to another competitor, right? I mean, it's, AMD is not going to sell their adjacent cheap property to, let's say, Intel. So I think in that same way, we would have a real interest in developing it with the CSD for potential fields. I think really if you think about soccer fields, for example, huge youth soccer movement, there aren't a lot of fields in our community. And so these would be real opportunities to be able to develop softball, baseball fields, all of those sorts of practice fields would be great. And so those would be real opportunities where we could work with Parks and Rec, as well as we talked about a senior center, perhaps another, pool, something like that, into the future for the community that could be really, really great.
And so just to follow up on that, and we're keeping you way later than we intended to do, so but as a public agency, if you wanted to dispose of land, would that offer have to be first to another public agency, make available? Similar to what happened with Pass Lake when they sold to Rescue had to make it available, CSD jumped in. And then the other part of that too is that, so that's a lot of land down there at the south end of El Dorado Hills, and that's where a lot of development will happen. But there's also the property along Silver Springs.
That is correct.
So we're talking a very long timeline for this. That would be even further, would it not?
Yeah, we have approximately, I believe it's 42 acres, which is just right up near the Bass Lake area. It's a great piece of property, but strategically, I can't see how it comes into play right now with the way that we're configured. The development that will definitely take place is the Blackstone area, Marble Valley, and that's where that growth will be realized. There'll be a point in time where that triggers the new high school that will go there, that will build into that over a period of a few years, just like Oak Ridge started and most high schools start, build into that capacity. At that point in time, there may be a discussion, I would imagine, about a boundary modification to be able to bring Oak Ridge down slowly in size and move some students to that new high school so that we have kind of relative balance and size across the district that would be really strategically a good opportunity.
What is your student-to-teacher ratio that we have in Oak Ridge?
Our student-to-teacher ratio. So, like everybody, we have a negotiated contract with our Teachers Association. So specifically, our ratio is 32 students per one teacher. And that is kind of put into play at each one of the campuses like that.
32.
Very good.
I'm wondering if you look at the total budget for
the high school district, and if you could give me a number for what your cost is per student enrolled, and then how that changes under the year.
Yeah, so let's see. First piece is our operating budget is about $80 million a year. We receive from the state of California about $9,500 per student is kind of our base allocation. The way that Measure A works is Measure A comes in specifically for facilities. So in a good way, taxpayers are protected by these types of bonds from having any of those dollars spent outside the arena of facilities. So with those dollars, we cannot use it for salaries, pensions, hiring new people. It is 100% for facilities. We actually have a bond oversight committee that would be kind of constructed of community members to ensure that each project that is completed at the high schools is aligned with the exact language that the voters approved. So there's no specific leeway. In addition, we have to hire an outside accounting agency to come in and to ensure that those dollars were spent in that way, if that helps. But about $9,500 per year for high schools.
And so, and then the interest payments per student then on Measure A would be?
I'm sorry, say again?
Well, what would your debt carry be if Measure A passes? I'm wondering what your increase is.
So the basic impact, again, for each one of our residential homes, it's based off assessed value, not market value, of course. The average home in our community is $58 per year, based on that assessed value. The way that bonds would work is it would probably take a period, we would sequence out the nature of the work. And sometimes, for example, if we wanted to do some work at Oak Ridge, the first question would be, can we do it during the summer or can we do it during the year? So for example, getting out in the middle of the campus with jackhammers going through a lot of concrete, not going to happen from August through pretty much, let's say, the end of May. So we know we'd be focused on summer construction. So we would look out over that time period and sequence all of those projects that we think we could get through, and then determine the rate by which we would borrow those funds. And so always making sure that the amount of funding that you have from selling those bonds is not accruing too much interest, because we've got to make sure that we have all of those dollars spent within a 3-year period, not to charge taxpayers for that dollar just sitting there, let's say. So there are a lot of strict requirements with that, but basically the nature of those bonds would be anywhere from short-term 5-year bonds to the lengthest, the longest length of those bonds would be 30.
Going back to the ratios, what is the ratio of students to teachers then? Because we only have 1,200 students in Dorado, is that still 32?
Exactly.
So that's the whole of the county, every high school is 32.
Yeah, so all of the high schools in the El Dorado Union High School District, we look at the number of students that are enrolled, we divide by that ratio, and that is what you call our full-time equivalents, our full-time teachers for each one of those campuses.
So in El Dorado, they have 32 in each class.
Exactly. And Oak Ridge the same.
But there's such a difference in enrollment.
Exactly. So you'll have fewer teachers at El Dorado, fewer staff, and more staff at Oak Ridge, but same proportions as you're looking at that for your teacher class ratios. Right there.
Hi, I'm Richard Ross, just a citizen here. I've been here for 28 years, and I would make the observation when I had a child at Oak Ridge, I was more attentive to and aware of things that were happening educationally. I was not particularly satisfied with your answer to Mr. White's question as to what was the topic of it, how the district evaluates development impacts and provides feedback to the planning process. Saying that you talk to significant entities about the consequences is not the same as putting information out where the public generally can be aware of it. You should know demographically that you have a large population here that is no longer now directly by a relative connected to the school system. Reaching those people all of whom are voters and regular voters, should be a concern of the school district if it wants to promote necessary activities. So I would strongly suggest you think about that. Now, I also know that getting the public to engage in governance is a real uphill battle, but that does not diminish the responsibility to try to communicate. And that's why I was, quite frankly, very dissatisfied with the way you kind of said, well, we know what's going to happen is a longer term, so we don't really want to spend much money on paying attention to that immediately. I would strongly suggest that you discuss internally how you can respond to these kind of things, even though you may not be able to have good projections and perfect visions, but at least so the rest of us know that you're listening. And I think in governance, that's one of the most important things that the citizen expects. So I really don't have a question, but I have that observation for you.
Well, I think I get the intent of what you're saying. I don't think you actually understand the way that school agencies interact with the other governmental agencies. I appreciate the idea that we're there to listen, but there is also a point where that is not specifically our role as educators. We are there to provide information if there's an impact on our facilities, if we see problems with traffic, if we see issues with congestion, if we know that there are other extenuating circumstances, we're engaged in those conversations. So I don't want to in any way think that we're being dismissive of that. But that's also something, for example, how much is the county government engaged in schools? That's not their specific job and responsibility. There are a lot of conversations. Does John and his team spend a lot of time writing me letters about how we should conduct our work? No, that's not how government works. That's not how your agencies collaborate. So as much as I do appreciate that, I'm going to press back and say, I don't think in any way we're being irresponsible with that. So just to be helpful.
We've taken up
convinced me.
We've taken up more than 20 minutes of your time today.
No problem.
So with that, I appreciate you coming down, and I think there's a valuable conversation for the community to have. And again, we thank you for coming down.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate the opportunity. It's always great to be in conversation and dialogue. I think it strengthens our work, it strengthens our relationships and our ability to see challenges coming our way and to listen to each other and learn. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're gonna. I guess it's not a really on our agenda tonight, we're just going to do some forecasting, some previews of things that are coming up that we expect to see before us. But we did want to update the community on some things that have happened with the Planning Commission, and primarily Central Auto Hills specific planning project. But we're going to start with every year the Planning Commission elects their own internal chair, vice chair. And this year our District 1 Planning Commissioner, John Bigner, is now the chair of the Planning Commission. And District 4 Planning Commissioner James Williams, who touches parts of Dorado Hills, is the vice chair. So, and John's very engaged in his work as the chair. I've talked to him several times from Hawaii in the last 2 weeks.
He's back now.
I know, but, and so yes, I know phone call today.
He called me on Saturday. So.
Yeah, I had multiple calls in one day from the beach. So, on January 13th, we obviously have the Planning Commission held a hearing for the Central Auto Hills specific plan here in El Dorado Hills. Something has not happened before. And you know, as we talked about it before, it was important for the community to respond, and boy did you respond. So, you know, if I've come to a Planning Commission hearing and it's not something that's very controversial, there might be 8 people in the room, there might be 2 people in the room, plus the Planning Commissioners. In excess of 400 people showed up. There was 1 hour of project review and 3 hours of public comment. So, and yeah, even though I was there and I heard every single thing said, I did sit through and listen to all 4 hours again on the audio recording. And we have it posted at the APAC website if you're into that sort of abuse. So, following that, the hearing was to be continued to tomorrow's Planning Commission date. And the intent was they've taken all the public comments in person that they would consider. and that it would be a deliberative action where they would consider the project. It's possible they could extend it again, but they would consider what's been presented, their research, their review, discuss some more things probably with the applicant, with staff, and then make some determination on what their recommendation would be to the Board of Supervisors. That has been continued until the end of March 26th. Here's the document, the internal memo from the planning department. They stated that in order to complete the analysis in response to the public comments received on the project, that staff recommends the project be continued to March 26th. So it's still on the agenda tomorrow. The likelihood is that it will grant that continuance. So, I mean, if you want to drive up to Glassville at 8:30, we would appreciate that, but the likelihood is that it will be continued. And again, that will be in Placerville. It will be at the end of March. I'm sure there'll be more documents submitted. We'll post them as they get legislated. So that's it for the Planning Commission. Really, there's been surprisingly little activity for Eldorado projects in the last month.
Hey, John?
Yes.
Do they allow more public comment?
You can we can send public comments in all the way up to that hearing, and they get put in the record. Most of the 4 planning commissioners, they do review documents when they come in, and so we know that they look at them. Whether it will come up in the hearing unless it generates a question internal to them or internal to staff or maybe to the applicant. Take your chance. So that was on the planning commission. Oh, here we go. Board of Supervisors, we just a quick list since January. They talked about the department fee schedule and policy procedures for appeals and for matters like that. I know that there was some consideration for greatly increasing them, that our rates for appeals and other fees is much lower than surrounding municipalities or counties. At the end of the day, the board elected to keep it at $239 for an appeal. The vineyards at Dorado Hills has been continued to February 25th. There's some work to obtain additional right-of-way for the Silver Springs Parkway, where there was some eminent domain procedures last year, and now they're finishing up and writing checks as it were. I'll just leave it at that. We don't want to delve into that. So, purchase agreement between the County of El Dorado and the El Dorado Community Services District, $250,000 for 41 acres at Bass Lake. So, that was an agreement. There's a grant, there's a deed, everything's in place. So that was a big part of the Bass Lake project. The CAC's been working to put those pieces together. They now control, or will control, all those various pieces. The last remaining piece would be the EID maintenance yard, which they have an agreement. It's technically kind of in an escrow state as they move those maintenance facilities, activities down to the Latrobe water treatment plant. The one remaining part is the 12.5 acres owned by Dorado Associates, and we'll talk about that with Jerry Sullivan. There was also an appeal, and it was an interesting thing. I found an interesting discussion to revise the timing needs of certain TIM fee payments. Basically, I think if I'm telling John if I'm wrong on this, is that somebody would apply for I think it was a case somebody had no history of a building permit for a property they bought, and that they would have to basically pay the full TIM fees. Am I wrong on that? Did I hear that wrong?
Well, I know one property that was never recorded as having improvements on it.
Yeah.
And so they had not been, they had not paid their permit fees and stuff, so they were going back to determine what an appropriate permit fee would be, but it turns out it was peculiar because they had been paying property taxes on it.
Yeah.
So somehow the county assessor was assessing it for property tax, but the building department never recorded or had to record the fact that there was an improved property.
So they were faced with an enormous upfront cost. So the board worked it out so that to the benefit of the residents. That's my ear. The last thing, really, at the board, and this was just on Tuesday. Appeal of the Serrano Village J7, which is right there at the Bass Lake overflow between Broadway Canyon's wall and the overflow. It was approved at the Planning Commission. Auditor Controller Joe Harn appealed it as a private citizen. His concerns were that the map conditions approved by the Commission don't adequately ensure the park mandated by the 1989 development agreement would be constructed by Serrano Associates, which is their obligation to parkland development. And the language of the development agreement is that they build the park. So there's still back and forth with the CSD talking about that. And then his second concern was that The approval will increase automobile, bike, pedestrian traffic, and will create safety and circulation impacts that aren't mitigated by the conditions that were approved by the commission. So I have an opinion on that, I want to share it tonight. So, we talked about this at the community council on Monday. The board approved yesterday Department of Transportation's conceptual solution that the impacts of Bridlewood Drive into Bridlewood Canyon, there's warrants are meant for a left turn, but not fully met in that they can't with the conditions. There's no money, they're not obligated to do it, they can't make the developer whose property is on this side pay for this left turn lane. So DOT called, I talked to Raphael in December, technically he asked me to come up. He sat down with Ron's back here, Ron Cassidy. He's a member of the HOA board for Bridlewood Canyon. He's also a member of the Bass Lake. You waving at me now?
Yep.
Okay. He's also serves with me on the Bass Lake Action Committee, and he's the director at large. So Raphael called us, we came up, they showed us this. Basically, this is a $2.2 million solution. Left turn lanes is closer to $4 million. There's no way to pay for any of it. But with roundabouts, there's grant funding available from the state and a little bit from the federal government. So this is a solution they're proposing. The board approved this yesterday to do a roundabout here. And then there's some discussion that in that agreement to sell the Bass Lake property to the CSD, they carved a little bit extra out here to facilitate the roundabout. So the right-of-way line is actually right here. So, and our conversation was, hey, have you talked to the CSD? Because it sounds like there's an opportunity to bike lanes, sidewalks, pedestrian facilities. The pedestrian facilities are still a concern for residents. I did notice that the El Dorado County Transportation Commission updated their active transportation plan. In that now, the CSD is contributing $10,000, and they're talking about a Class 1 mixed-use path, bike, pedestrian, from Silver Springs Parkway, where it will intersect, the construction starts this year, that will go all the way around the edge of the lake to Serrano Parkway. In addition to that, they've also identified Class 2 bike lane for Green Valley, Bass Lake Road from Silver Springs Parkway to Green Valley Road. And oddly, a Class 3 bike route on Summer Drive inside Woodridge that will go to a road that dead ends that will connect to a future subdivision. So the agreement, though, the way they're going to get this done, because the conditions that exist won't get the grant funding based on that. They need seed money, and they went to Serrano Associates who agreed to provide $200,000. They're going to go to Bridlewood residents and ask them to form a CFP to tax themselves and match them $200,000. And that'll be over several years. But I know that we initially had talked. DOT had said probably $50 a year for 5 years. I think that we had talked about $100 a year for 3 years. But that's those residents to get this grant money. Those residents are taxing themselves to provide this, and so this is a solution for them, but it's also a solution for the community around them. So ideally, we can spread that out and make that burden a little less, but it's a big obstacle to get over. So they still have to vote to approve it. So that's it. Board of Supervisors. That's we just wanted to take care of those things. Really quickly, as we jump through, I'm looking at the clock. You can see that one. Well, we get around. So I'm going to Brooke. Do you want to come up and talk about this? Brooke, just highlight this. We had Ann Novotny was up here last month, I believe. Going too far. There we go. To talk about community design standards for commercial and multifamily development in El Dorado Hills. There's also efforts going on for Shingle Springs, El Dorado Diamond Springs, and like the other one.
Cameron Park.
Thank you. They're actually going pretty fast. But Brooke is a member of that volunteer the cat team, and she's going to brief you what's going on and how the meeting started changed.
Oh, I can't really remember, but it was really well attended. We had a great group. It was more attended than I thought it would be. The first meeting was spent basically getting to know what the project would be, kind of the scope, and then getting a lot of input from the residents as to what they want. What do they envision El Dorado Hills to look like, and what do they want the mixed-use development to look like? And there was quite a variety of ideas that will get flushed out. There are some questionnaires that people filled out, and I do believe there's still an opportunity for people to join in if they would like to. And there was a little confusion as to what a mixed-use development looks like. Mixed use would be commercial primarily on the bottom and residential on top, which is something new for Eldorado Hills. So we were supposed to have a few more meetings. Those have been postponed. I think we reconvene in either March or June. So.
Thank you for the update. And also, Joel is also, as an APAC member, he's also on the community action team. Mike Lilienthal from the fire department, Tim's wife is in it. So there are a lot of community residents that are participating, and hopefully we get a good result from this because this is something we haven't done in the past. So, community design standards. So, forecast for projects we believe we're probably either going to see or hear more about this year. The first one is Montana de Dorado, which the last time we heard was October of 2018 when they recirculated the NOP for the draft environmental impact report. Basically, waterfall's right there, Pete's Coffee's in there, all that good stuff right now that exists for the existing development. This is White Rock Road and Latrobe right here. Town center is on this side. Talking about developing this area down here, it's they're going to have a retail element of about 8 buildings, 74,000 square feet. And they have various sizes, 1,000 to 30,000. Also 63,000 square foot hotel, an amphitheater for public events. There'll be an office at the southern end of the project, 6,000 square feet, about 43 feet high. We know that residents back here, we had heard from them when this was proposed in 2017. We talked about it quite a bit, and they're very concerned about, an amphitheater here, hotel, and impact. So, we're looking forward to hearing, but we believe that we'll be hearing more about the draft environmental impact report shortly. No timeline. So this will also actually it'll extend Post Street, where it comes in right here to the existing development, extend it through the development and connect to Latrobe Road. It's a private road inside town center. It's unclear if it would be a private road inside this development. They also have another right in, right out, only at the end of the development and the existing access points on White Rock Road. So this is what they proposed, and these documents are available on the APAC website if you want to look at it. Hotel in the middle, restaurant, amphitheater, drive-through, and a mini anchor as they described it. The office space would be at the back right here, and then Post Street would come through the back of the facility and exit back out onto the road. So whether this is the same project we're talking about now, or if it's been modified, if the DEIR has found other things that they want to mitigate, we'll learn about it. And you're all welcome to participate. Thank you. The other item, Oakmont has purchased all this property in Town Center West from the Mansour Company. They built their new Oakmont Senior Living facility down here, and they had such a positive response to this development that they envisioned sort of a senior area in all this area. Right now it's research development, some industrial, some commercial, and that's from the 1980 Dorado specific plan, and more pointedly the 1995 Town Center plan development. So the Town Center East is on this side, Target, the movie theater, the Latrobe right here. They're envisioning, originally when they did their pre-app presentation to the Board of Supervisors, their original idea was that it would be all senior focused, senior rentals, because we don't have any senior rentals, we have a lot of senior properties to buy, but they're looking for something that's an unmet need right now that you can't rent as a senior. So it's a compelling idea. They would keep the existing setbacks from the, which are larger from the R&D and the commercial, and just put the residential type of product inside that and respect those approved setbacks, which are better. They did a lot of outreach with residents right here who seemed to have no problem with it. Subsequent to that, at that board, at the pre-app hearing, there were some questions about, well, are we overburdening our senior need right now? Is there a possibility that this could later become just rental housing, which, there's a demonstrated need for, or maybe it could be from the get-go, parts of it be. So they've come back, they do have an application filed. I've talked to King Kid from Oakmont quite a bit. As soon as they have something ready to present, because they're going to do some environmental work, they want to get everything lined up they've committed to do. some studies, to make sure the traffic impacts, which are projected to be less than the R&D impacts were from 1988 or in 1995, they believe it'll be less. But they're doing the work, and we're going to hear more about it. I would assume, I talked to them in December, it'd probably be sometime this year, if it's maybe by June, I'm guessing there, but that seems to be, they're very eager to do this. And that's just another look at the property. They also have talked about, I know they had talked to a couple of people about it, a hotel and event center, or sort of a conference center at the upper end of the property along Highway 50. It is approved by rights right now for that, based on this planned development overlay. They could just pull building permits and build a hotel there. So, but they're very excited because it would be something, a room like this that would be available to the public, I imagine for a nickel or two. But we've already gotten in line. If this gets approved, we'd like to borrow the room once in a while. But so this is coming soon. I imagine that I'll hear from Ken soon, but they're very excited about the project. The other two projects.
Before you leave that, the other part of that is they're working with the medical facility.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes.
Medical.
Thank you, yes.
Which I think would be a huge benefit if we get that, so.
Yeah, they talked about their commercial part of this, retail, medical offices or medical services. If you're going to have a senior community, which is what they talked about originally, they want to have those services available on site, because the way they do this on senior living, they have a lot of concierge services. They have chefs on site. They have some assisted living type of activities and staff to take care of it. They were really envisioning making this sort of a senior destination, just to have those facilities and services nearby, and it would reduce the traffic a little bit. So part of the pitch was that you get town center right here, it's close. I don't know how walkable that is. I guess we'll study that. But yeah, so that was, and so they have talked to Marshall. I know they talked to about, they talked to a lot of medical services that they really want those facilities and those amenities available. So, and what they're doing, I'm sorry, I'm jumping ahead. It's mixed use in that it would be residential combined with some commercial and some office and medical services. So the other
two types of mixed use, and since we addressed it a little bit, vertical and horizontal.
And horizontal is everything on the ground. Vertical is, as Bruce mentioned, residents on top. Services on the bottom.
So what's proposed here is that horizontal, so that you have the businesses on one side and you have the housing on the other side, but they're built to be compatible and to actually provide services for the housing.
Yeah, and their belief was that mixed use was not defined before the general plan came out before. Now there's a mixed use element. They think that it's strictly language should just be added to as a specific plan amendment. Whether that's true or not, we'll all talk about it. Probably too much. Two projects we talked to the applicants last year that we expect to hear something from this year. That would be the 200 acres at the south end of the business park that were de-annexed out of the business park, because the projections right now is that it's decades before that business park would ever be built out. So Wind Communities has purchased this. They will apply for essentially a specific plan, the way they described it when they were here. So it's 207 acres south of the business park, right below them. Oops, I'll jump on the other side. Right below them here is the future high school site that Dr. Ruth had talked about. On this side is the next project we'll talk about, and it's also in R&D right now. But this side is zoned R&D. They need a rezone. We're talking, I think at one point the upper number is 900 homes. It might be something that's less. But they talked about maybe not a gated community, but more obtainable housing, where you'd have, I don't want to call them starter homes, but you'd have more basic homes that would feed the need for employees of the business park. That's the concept. Initially they talked about apartments or multifamily, and they said that won't pencil out for this project. We'll learn more about it. But they were very kind. And I'm sure that George Carpenter from Wind will have something for us in the near future. This is the internal, some of their suggested densities. This would be low density, where there's bigger lots, bigger homes, higher density, these orange areas, There's an opportunity for a lot of open space for buffers around it, and also they have a park space in the middle, but they talked about a park at this end that is right next to the John Adams Academy, and their vision is that they would build a joint use field like many of our schools have with the CSD, and then they would want to be annexed into the CSD to maintain and program that field, and that John Adams Academy would have use of it for their physical education activities. So, moving along, I'm too fast with my buttons. The Carson Creek specific plan amendment rezone, Lennar, they were kind enough to come out and talk to us. I want to say it was late spring, early summer. And this is all R&D zone spaces at the bottom of their heritage communities right now. And it was on the west side of the project we just looked at. They're talking about deleting the industrial and research and development categories, adding some community center property right here in the middle. 1.7 acres of local convenience commercial, some shopping, some retail, and converting 84 acres to residential from R&D and industrial. No change to the 30-acre park. It's at the southern end of the property, and the total area is about 132 acres. So they did come and present sort of a pre-vision to us, and then they went to the Board of Supervisors and did a re-up presentation there. And then this is sort of a larger look at where the property is. And this was the other project that was over here that would abut against it. And it's at the bottom of their heritage product right now. Village of Marble Valley, we'll talk about that again tonight. It's a 2,300 acre project, about 3,200 dwelling units, 475,000 square feet of commercial use, 87 acres of public facilities, recreational, 1,200 acres open space, 42 acres of ag, and 73 acres of road and right-of-way for future roadways. And this is on the south end of Bass Lake Road, goes from the highway up to the north. On the south, it's Marble Valley, and it goes back through, and technically parts would be Denver Park, if I'm remembering correctly. They did have an existing specific plan or project approved in 1998, the Marble Valley Master Plan, which was about 400 lots, and this would be an amendment to that. And this is a project that Serrano Associates are working on. And I know that last year was a newspaper article where Kirk had mentioned that they're getting ready to have the draft EIR. So I would imagine we'll see something soon. Timing, we don't know. I know they have a little bit on their plate right now that we've been talking about for a few months. In addition to this, I don't have it on here tonight, but there's another project, the Lion Rock Valley specific plan. And I'm blank on the number of units, but it would be on this side of this project. 1,200, thank you. So that's another one, but I don't know, we haven't heard anything about that. We have heard that the draft EIR is in progress with this project. And that's sort of an overlook of how, there's not much available right now. I know that their website might have a little bit more. This is what we have from project documents that were available from the county. So we'll be talking about this. Okay, Costco. Sure. We talked about this quite a bit. It's still unknown. We know that they, John had discussed previous months that, the original intent was for them to move forward with the EDH 52 project as sort of co-applicants to do all their environmental work together. Apparently the EDH 52 is kind of dragging on for time. The original concept back in March of last year was to have the warehouse facility on this side of Silver Valley Parkway and the fueling station on this side. And then the EDH 52 would develop the rest of this. And of course, there's the Silver Valley interchange. In June, I got an email when I was in Hawaii. And so we rushed back, and this is a new concept. The presidency, Costco came out, and he thought it'd be better fit to have all facilities on one side of the road. So the fueling station would still be over here, the warehouse would be over here. The difference is that there's substantially less space, but they'd have bi-level parking. Part of the parking would be underground, below grade. Oops, I'm going to jump through that. And this is sort of a cutaway where they pull it out from underneath the ground level and then the below ground. It would have 560 parking stalls on grade and 219 underground. It would be the first location in the United States that Costco would do that. They've done it in Asia and Mexico. Okay, this is an expensive thing to do. And that ground is hard to dig in, which will make it triply expensive. So the belief is that they're pretty committed to wanting to do this. So they have a cart conveyor, like an escalator. And my friend in Brooklyn sent me pictures of what it looks like in their store. And the store front would face the west, the retaining wall on the back, and then 3 entrances on Clarksville Crossing, the old Silver Valley, and then 2 proposed entrances from Silver Valley, both of them toward the north end. Now, obviously my first thing is like, well, how's Clarksville Crossing going to handle this traffic? We'll figure it out when we talk about it. I'm sure when we get the application, we'll have some environmental work. And then this was the original EDH 52, where it was both sides of the highway. Now, Costco's obviously talking about this. But this was proposed, I think in 2017, we talked about 350,000 square feet of retail with a hotel, 3 gas stations, self-storage, along the sort of the bottom part of it here. Oh, those buildings right there. So obviously those plans are up in the air. We don't know what they are. We haven't heard anything back, but the lawyers called me right away to say, we want to make sure we have your contact information on file. So I'm sure we'll hear about it when we're ready. So with that's our forecast for what we see potentially this year. These things might not happen. This is what we believe. There could be other things. There's a couple other projects we've heard about. I'm not talking about any, but
just one other thing. There is the Bass Lakes North project, and Norm.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Norm Brown is left, I guess. But Norm Brown was required when he built Bass Lake North to build a 100 car parking lot at the corner of Bass Lake and 50. This was to be for parking for commuters. They could park there and the buses would pick them up and take them down to Sac or up to Placerville. He is now applied to reduce his commitment from 100 parking spaces to 50. And I understand now the Department of Transportation has said actually would rather get a fee from you and not build any parking spaces at all.
I had not heard that yet because
I heard it from Norm tonight.
Oh, okay, well. Kathy Prevost, APAC member, she has some documents from 2016-17 that are a little more detailed as to how that was negotiated and settled, beyond just what's available online from the county. We want to take a look at this and we want to respond to it because we did get a letter from the planning department asking for a response by March. I don't remember the date, but we want to make an informed reply. I think at the beginning we're all looking at, as APAC members looking at it, it's like, well, this was negotiated, this was agreed upon, that you would do these things, and this merited the concessions that got the project approved. We're a bit dissatisfied that the ask has come back later to say, hey, can I change that now? He's got some numbers that show that it's an astronomical cost to construct 100 parking spaces.
There were 69 conditions of approval for this project.
So that makes 66, 67.
A lot. I would just like to say, okay, if you're going to go back and request that one of these conditions of approval be removed, which has some significant cost involved with it, that let's go look and see which of those other 67 have you done, what's the status of all the others. I just don't think you should just be able to pick one condition of approval that costs you a lot of money and say, okay, I can't do this now, I don't want to do this now. Explain why.
There's still some talk about Hawkview Drive, which is Silver Dove, and the Buckeye School District properties back there. They don't believe that they're going to need a school over there, so they don't. There's some talk about you might not want to construct that roadway. This is phase 2 of the Bass Lake Hills Pacific Plan. This is the only project in phase 2. The other projects are in construction right now. It did take 2 years for him to get annexed to the EID, but he's suggesting that future projects in that specific plan, of which there are none yet, they could easily accommodate these things because there'd be more development and more need at that time. So we need to make an informed response, and it's just a letter. But our intent is to do that.
I had a question because when I was looking at the documents as a result of your email that we need to look at this issue, there was a conditions of approval that was approved in January 26, 2017.
Yep.
There was a conditions of approval that was approved in February 28, 2017. And there were some differences. Some things were taken out.
But his project came technically after the rest of the Bass Lake Hills Pacific Plan.
So which one am I looking at is what I'm trying to say.
My answer is yes.
Well,
No, and
that's-
that's fair, because when I sat down with DOT back in January, and we talked about that roundabout, I said, well, what about the interchange, because, you know, the signal light was approved at the CIP this year, and it's gonna be constructed for the off-ramp for eastbound Bassett Road. And I'm looking at the cost, it's $1.2 million, the developer's paying $250,000, county's paying the rest for Kim fees. A traffic light costs $1 million. And so I said, you know, the plan was there's supposed to be 2 left turn lanes under the highway, 2 lanes going through up towards the new country club intersection. That's not part of this, and they don't know why we're misinformed. That was never part of it. Even though when I looked at the conditions of approval for all Bass Lake Hills specific plan projects, they say that, you know, they're required to, at time of map filing, that they have to analyze the interchange at US 50, and then when appropriate, when those triggers are met, go ahead and basically pay or construct the interchange improvements. And DOT's response was, this project will never trigger those development improvements. Marble Valley will probably trigger it. This project won't. Then why do you even put them in? But because they trade a lot of things to get country club, you know, they're paying in front to build country club, and it's much needed, but a lot of things that went away with it too. So.
Well, that's why it relates to how much the developer is saying it costs him to build this number of spaces, and which of these I'm looking at, the February or the January, which has taken some things out, which would then change the financial appearance of the situation.
So, you know, at a base level, you say, what's the last one? That's, I think, where we have to start.
That's what I was saying, I should go with the last one.
We also need to analyze what was the fruit port, so.
Okay.
Thank you. One more.
Okay, just a quick question for you, and probably John, I'm not sure which one, but can you tell me the process for the Bass Lake Hills Park, or the Bass Lake Park, how that's gonna get reviewed and approved, and then specifically the 15 acres that Parker's entitled to build?
12.5.
Yeah, that right, where there's a parking lot right up against Toronto homeowners, which we're very concerned about. I mean, where's the forum for us to, does it go to you guys? Does it just go straight to the planning commission?
Community Services District has made presentations to APAC, they're willing to make presentations to any group as far as I know. So the best thing to do is get set up with a personal presentation, they'll explain.
Yeah, we will invite them.
Really laid out today, and ask for inputs, they're still asking for inputs. What do you want to see here?
But who makes the decision?
Ultimately, the CSD board will make the decision.
So not the,
what goes in there.
not the board of supervisors, not the planning commission.
CSD owned property, the board has nothing to do
All right.
with it, other than approving permits.
Okay.
Yeah, the traffic analysis.
Traffic assessment.
Okay.
The person in charge is Tawny Kessler.
Tony is the director of Parks and Planning,
Yeah,
CSD,
and
but Kevin Lowen is still engaged with
Yeah,
that.
but you could invite her to come out to the Toronto State Parade meeting if you want, and explain
All right,
exactly.
And to be fair, I'm on Bass Lake Action Committee, and that was a driving element of how we formed our nonprofit. You know, and our concern was always, well, you know, our homes are here, you're going to put a park in after the fact. The fact that they're going to put a park in, and then the majority of those residents get to decide whether they want to live next to it for lot
I
age.
know you were not very sympathetic.
No, I wasn't.
For homeowners.
It's only been 15 years. So, but no, that's the concern we have too, the lights and the parking. But then again, the other component is there's a commercial.
It needs to move to pass well.
All right. So our next meeting is March 11th. Hope it won't take us long. Thank everybody for coming tonight, and we'll see you next month.
Yeah, we need to get Charlie into that.
Okay.